Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, all. I'm here today to introduce Andrew Chelly, the independent investigator hired by City Council. Mr. Chelly will conduct an investigation that will give us a better picture of the internal communications, decisions, and actions that took place in the city related to the death of Daniel Prude, beginning with the first 911 call to when the first 911 call was placed on March 23rd, 2020. The City Council will have an extremely limited role in this investigation. The way I see it, our job is to ensure that Mr. Chelly has unfettered access to any information he may need to be able to issue his report. As such, I have created a special committee, the Independent Investigation Committee, comprised of only 2 council members that will facilitate the work of the independent investigator. They are Council Member Malik Evans and Council Member Michael Patterson. Mr. Chelly will be able to speak more on the use of this special committee. Today, the council met in a special meeting to authorize the issuance of subpoenas related to Mr. Chelly's investigation. The council body is unique in its ability to issue subpoenas, and it's necessary that we do so to assist Mr. Chelly. Now I turn it over to Mr. Chelly. When he has concluded, he will be available to answer questions related to his independent investigation.
Thank you, President Scott, and good afternoon, everyone. I did want to take this opportunity to introduce myself and the team and to talk a little bit about our principles and processes as we go into this investigation. The first thing I want to say, though, is it's a profound honor to be selected for this important work. I'm not sure if people know this, but Rochester is my hometown. I was born and raised in the 10th Ward, where my mom still lives, and I have relatives and cousins all over the Monroe County. And I grew up with a deep sense of community and commitment to Rochester. My dad actually served on the City Council in the 1960s, going all the way back. So I know that this is a great community. It is a strong community. It's a community that's asking hard questions, and it's a community that deserves clear answers. And that's what I'm committed to do. I and my team are committed to do. Let me say a word about where I've been for the last 30 years since I moved out of Rochester and down to New York City and became a lawyer. Much of my practice in the last 30 years has been committed to issues around policing and police accountability. I have studied and investigated police departments, including the NYPD. I was the chief of the Civil Rights Bureau at the New York Attorney General's office. We wrote a major report on stop and frisk at the NYPD in the late 1990s. I have sued police officers in my private practice. I have trained police officers, and I've learned from police officers. And all of that, I think, is important context for this particular investigation, although our focus is really less on police practices sort of at the street level. It's really on what happened within the government processes. And there's another aspect of my experience that I think reflects on that, which is that it has been a regular part of my practice to represent government branches when there are intragovernmental conflicts or disputes. So, for example, I and my firm have represented the New York City Council in 4 or 5 litigations against the New York City mayor, both mayors Bloomberg and de Blasio. We've represented the Office of the Public Advocate, which is an office in New York City that's an oversight office that oversees the executive branch. And of course, we're currently representing the City Council in the police accountability litigation, where the mayor is not aligned with the City Council in that particular case. These experiences, again, I think will be helpful as we go into the investigatory phase of this work. I do want to introduce my team. These are the people who are going to do the work with me, and their backgrounds and experiences are important. Catherine Rosenfeld has been my law partner and colleague for something close to 15 years. She's the former legal director of the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. She's been in our firm, and she has deep experience in investigating government systems. Particularly, her background is more in the jail and prison context, but also obviously in policing as well. Scout Katovich is a young colleague of ours, extremely talented young lawyer. And she has spent the last year or so studying the 1909 Rochester City Charter because she's the colleague who works with me on the PAB litigation for the council. She also was an investigative lawyer at the New York Civil Liberties Union and had experience there looking into practices around the nuisance statute in Rochester. So she has a Rochester connection as well. And then a new friend and colleague and just an absolute gift to the city of Rochester, it seems to me, Linda Kingsley, who you guys probably know, I did not know before last week, the former corporation counsel for the city of Rochester, a professor at Albany Law School, a huge resource of wisdom and knowledge and judgment and independence. And her willingness to serve as part of this group on a pro bono basis is really just a gift. So that's who we are. I want to spend a couple minutes just talking about principles and process. The City Council has asked us to conduct a thorough investigation of the intragovernmental processes that were in play and to determine who knew what when with respect to the death of Daniel Prude. There's really one question here, and that is, was there a cover-up? That's a blunt way to put it, but that's the question we are seeking to answer. And there are really a number of ways to address that. Number one is to determine a timeline of events, to gather information and put them on a timeline so that we know specifically from documents and testimony exactly what happened in what sequence. And that's our first mission. Number two is to examine carefully how government actors within the city of Rochester's structure communicated with each other behind closed doors, not in public, about what they knew and when they knew it. And it's possible that there could be people who knew and people who didn't know within the same government, even within the same departments, even within the same offices. We have to be open to all possibilities. And then the third thing is extremely important, perhaps the most important, is what is it that City of Rochester officials said publicly, and what did they know when they said it? Was there a cover-up with respect to the public? And I think that's a compelling question that President Scott has asked us to answer. The council, as President Scott mentioned, has directed that we be independent even of them, that we have unfettered access to the information and materials that we need to do our work, including the gathering of testimony, sworn testimony from witnesses about meetings, about phone calls, about text messages, and of course, all the underlying documents and materials. Some of this stuff has come out already. The Deputy Mayor's report and its attachments certainly scratched the surface. And I think to his credit, he acknowledges in his report that he did not go deep enough, given the time and the need for independence that was appropriate. We're going to go much deeper than the Deputy Mayor did, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're starting from the baseline principle that the answer lies in credible evidence. And when I say evidence, I'm being very specific here. We're talking about contemporaneous documents that were created at the time. They may be policy documents, they may be text messages or emails, they may be memos. But those contemporaneous documents and how they played out in sequence are very important. Then, as I said, we're going to take testimony from people. We haven't decided exactly who, but I suspect it'll be more than a few about what they knew and when they knew it. We're also going to look at this candidly through the lens of common sense. President Scott and the council have said, we want you to apply your experience to the facts that you find and to come to conclusions. And we're going to come to conclusions. We're going to provide our best answer to the questions. It'll then be up to the public, council, and all members of the city government to determine whether we're right or wrong. But this is not some kind of a generic report where we're going to give you a bunch of information and ask you to figure out what to do with it. We are going to provide our best response to those three questions: the timeline, internal cover-up, external cover-up. Finally, the instructions that the council gave to us are very clear and unambiguous. Get to the truth. Investigate and report without fear or favor. Use all the tools that your craft provides to you, which are asking hard questions, following leads, reviewing the precedent, and getting at what the best practices should have been and what the actual practices were. And of course, and this is a result of today's action in the council, to use the very important and quite unique power to issue a subpoena, which the council today authorized us to do on their behalf. We expect subpoenas to be issued, if not today, then certainly by Monday, to the 4 relevant agencies. That they are the mayor's office or city hall being the first, the Rochester Police Department being the second, the law department being the third, and the city council itself. To the great credit of this council, they not only acknowledged but insisted that their processes be questioned and interrogated and investigated. No one is off limits. Their injunction to us was to get to the bottom of it. The council has no agenda in this investigation other than the truth. And we have no agenda other than the truth. And a good investigation is going to take us where the evidence leads us. This is not a gotcha investigation. We don't have somebody in our sights, somebody targeted. We're just trying to find out what really happened here. Finally, I'll say that we expect the full cooperation of the mayor and her administration. We think it's not just appropriate, but legally required. And we have every reason to think that that's going to be the case. So with that basic background, I'll stop, and if there are any questions, I can answer them.
Certainly. We have a question from Mr. Breen. Go ahead. You're muted, Mr. Breen.
Okay, thank you, BJ. Andrew, do you expect to question the mayor under oath? And what is it that you want to learn from her?
So we haven't made any final decisions about who we will question under oath. I would be lying if I didn't tell you that it's under consideration, of course. And I think I hazard to say she understands that. But this is an investigation of the processes of government, and she's the chief executive. So we haven't made that determination, but it wouldn't surprise me, put it to you that way. In terms of what we're going to cover with her, I mean, that I'm not going to get into at this point. You know, this is a process. We're going to learn facts based on documents and interviewing other people. And if we come to the point where we feel we need to take her testimony, then we'll do it at that point.
You can have one follow-up if you do.
Sure. Thanks, BJ. Will everybody that you talk to or question, will they be under oath?
That's the plan. There may be people who we think have kind of information that's more of an administrative nature, like we need to figure out where certain documents are kept, that we wouldn't bother putting them under oath. But yes, anybody who's going to provide substantive information about what happened here, we'll give that testimony under oath.
Thank you.
We'll move on. Mike Herschel. Does Mike Herschel have a question? Oh.
Good. So I'm not going to comment on a substantive question like that. That is a substantive question. It's one of the things that we'll have to look at, of course. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I think the council, I think President Scott is not taking questions. And the reason on this topic today, and the reason for that is, let me be clear. I mentioned this, the special committee was mentioned also. My task is to do this independently. And what I explained to the council today was that the way that it will be done independently is to basically for them not to direct our work. They're not telling us who to talk to. They're not telling us who not to talk to. They're not telling us which subpoenas to issue and not issue, or even what specific questions to answer other than those 3 broad ones that I said at the beginning. And so to the extent there may be people on council or even council staff that can respond to the question substantively, I will get to that. We will get to that in the course of our investigation.
Move on to Patty Singer with the Minority Reporter.
Hi, thank you. I'm unfamiliar with how subpoena process works, and maybe a lot of other people as well. Is the people who are being subpoenaed, is that going to be publicly available? So when these go out, it's going to be a list saying A, B, C, D, PQRS, they've all been subpoenaed.
Yes, that's the plan. If there's an investigative reason that we don't want to disclose it, then we don't have to. But our plan, and this is again consistent with what President Scott's and the council's injunction to us is to be transparent about what we're doing. And so you'll have a chance to look at what questions are being asked in the subpoena, what documents are being gathered.
So that will be put out, if you say some of these could be delivered today or Monday, that's going to be put out through your office, through council? I mean, how is that going to be transmitted to the public?
It's a good question. I don't know the answer to, but it'll be one or the other. Probably our office, probably my office.
Okay. And what are the two? What are Malik Evans and Michael Patterson? What is their role then with you if council's trying to take a hands-off approach to this?
Thank you for that question, Ms. Singer. It's very important. They have a very, very limited role. It's an administrative function. The charter requires that a committee basically be the party to whom information is returned, and they are going to play that role, but they are not going to participate in directing us or even advising us. We are not going to update them as we get information, and that's all at the request of Council President Scott and the entire council. They want to be walled off from this investigation, just like everybody else is, and they will see the report when it's done. But as a technical legal matter, we didn't need to have a committee to put on the documents for the subpoenas. And so this committee was established for that very limited purpose. But they really, to put it bluntly, they have no substantive role whatsoever.
I'll go back in the queue, BJ. I'll let others have a chance.
Move to Wendy Wright Richards.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to clarify, you will be sending a subpoena to Chief Singletary and the mayor and members of City Council?
So the first subpoenas are going out to those 4 agencies, and there will be more to come beyond that. And my guess is that all the people you named will end up with subpoenas, yes.
So how many are we talking about, and how long do you expect your investigation to go?
The number of subpoenas, not clear, more than a handful for sure. Our hope is that to be done with this investigation in approximately 3 months. But that also depends on ensuring that we get the documents back promptly, and having the cooperation of the administration, and any other individuals outside the administration who are going to respond also are going to need to respond promptly. So there could be some delays in that regard, but we're hoping that doesn't happen.
I find your work with the intra-government conflicts interesting. If you're seeing that here, and some of the folks even in the same departments and same organizations are conflicting, how do you move forward with that and help to resolve that?
Well, we don't know, right? So what I was describing to you is historically work that I've done in those kinds of situations. We don't know whether that happens here or not. But if there were to be differing points of view, differing recollections, differing stories, if you will, we're going to report that. We're going to report that out, and we're going to apply the principles of basic credibility that apply in the law to draw conclusions. And that's why that was something that was very important to the council, that we do that as independent investigators. And we're going to write about it. And there will be a report that everyone who cares about this issue will have a chance to pick apart and decide whether it's credible or not. I'm confident it will be.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Gino Finelli.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for taking the time. So I wanted to touch on something you said about the deputy mayor's report, that it just scratched the surface. And I just wanted to get an idea of what more are you looking for right now? What exactly do you think is missing from that report? And obviously you're filing subpoenas and everything right now. What do you think is missing in that report that you're seeking right now?
So I'll answer that by saying that the deputy mayor's report, by its terms, described itself as a cursory review based on essentially a pass at looking at documents. And I think that's a starting point. Maybe that's a better way to put it. We're going to start from zero. We're not relying on anything that anybody else did, and not deputy mayor, not what the newspapers have done. We're going to go to the primary documents. But a full investigation includes not just what people put on paper, but what they recall, what they say, what they remember other people saying. And that there's no way to focus people's attention on their recollections than to ask them to testify truthfully under oath. And I think that the deputy mayor's report even says this, that he acknowledged that given the time constraints and the scope of what he was assigned to do, he did not have the ability to get really to the bottom of all of it because he could not interview, and he certainly doesn't have subpoena power.
Thanks. I have no follow-up.
Okay, we're going to move on to Brian Sharp.
Hello, thank you for being available today. I was wondering a couple of questions. I know you have a 3-month time frame. Any sense of how soon you will begin taking testimony from individuals?
Don't know.
That was easy.
I mean, look, there's a couple different ways to go about this. Normally, we would try to get documents first and then take depositions, but there might be exceptions to that. So it's just hard to tell right now. We're just getting started.
And there's obviously a number of investigations, either ongoing, soon to launch. How do you foresee, could that complicate your work in any way, or how do you maneuver between all of those?
So our work is a intragovernmental study, essentially. We don't have criminal jurisdiction, obviously. We don't have civil jurisdiction. There's no lawsuit that we are going to bring. There is litigation that's related to this, the Prude family's litigation being one of them. And of course, there's the Attorney General's investigation that really focuses on what happened on the street on March 23rd, which is a different topic. I expect that we will coordinate or at least communicate with the Attorney General's office. There is some overlap there in terms of things that communications between the city officials and the AG's office. But I think we're going to really steer clear of any of the issues about what happened between the officers and Mr. Prude. And that's where I think the criminal focus is. In terms of the Office of Public Integrity, which is out of the mayor's office, I mean, they're going to do what they do, and I don't expect to have any conflicts there at all. That's just a separate thing. So I think we'll be able to navigate this pretty easily, actually.
Just one last thing. Does Chief Singletary's separation cause any hiccup in your access to him?
It shouldn't.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jane.
Hi, I wanted to ask about how public the findings will be. Will they be released at the end or throughout?
Yeah, that'll ultimately be up to the council. My understanding is they've made a commitment to release our report publicly. We will not be giving updates during the investigation. We're going to go underground and do our work and emerge with what we think the best evidence is and the best answer is. And then the idea would be that not just our report, but the underlying evidence that we gather, including the depositions, will be transcribed and made available. And so that'll be another checking mechanism. You and the press and the public, everyone can have an opportunity to examine why we reached the conclusions we did.
Thank you.
Going back to Patty.
Thanks. But you said you wouldn't be giving updates, but you will give a list of who's been subpoenaed, right? I just want to be clear.
Right, that'll be public, right?
Okay. All right. My question is about Linda Kingsley. What exactly is the role there, and why is that a pro bono role versus your role being having allocated $100,000?
I will not be doing the investigation. Mr. Celli's firm will be doing the investigation. I was asked, and I have agreed to generally serve pro bono on a temporary basis with City Council to help them through a variety of issues related to this crisis facing the city. And frankly, the reason it's pro bono is I do not actively practice anymore. I'm a law professor by trade now. But I come to this with a number of years of experience working with the city as corporation counsel, and many more years than that of working in local government law and now teaching state and local government law. So I saw this as an opportunity to give back to my community, and that's what I'm doing.
Can you say specifically what you will be doing? Can you give some examples?
I think I'll leave it to Ms. Scott to at some point talk about that. I think you'll see me involved in various issues and initiatives that they're dealing with. But basically, they were just asking me if I would offer my advice and guidance as needed on a variety of issues. I'm giving my advice and guidance as Mr. Celli seeks it, but his firm will be conducting the investigation. I will not.
And just one last thing about just kind of the process of this. If the city charter gives council the subpoena power, why did we need this legislation today? Is it because there's a third party involved in it?
No, this was what we call in the law belts and suspenders. So you want to make sure that you do everything possible to cover any possible questions. My understanding is that there's a very limited history of the council issuing subpoenas. I think this council did it once before, maybe a couple of years ago in the Pate matter. And I'm not sure how often it was done prior to that. On the previous occasion, the council passed legislation authorizing the issuance of subpoenas. And so the idea was that we should follow that precedent. It was at a public meeting, obviously. It was 8-0 by the council. And that will answer any question as to whether or not there was authority on the part of the council to do this. We have 8 members who all agreed that it was necessary.
We wanted to make sure it was legally clear that this was the will of the council and that they were giving the direction to the president to issue the subpoenas. And if you look at the resolution, it just also addresses some of the procedural issues for how they want things to be handled.
Are there any further questions?
So when would we expect the first update, Mr. Sully, about when the subpoenas have gone out?
As soon as they go out, contemporaneously. If it's today, it'll be today. It probably won't be till Monday, only because we have some technical stuff we have to deal with on our end. But we're going to be letting people know that it's happened contemporaneously, unless there's an investigative reason to hold that back, which is not the case with respect to these initial ones.
Thank you.
By the way, I'm corrected. It was not the Pate matter, but the Bryant matter in which a subpoena was previously issued. Just want to make sure I got that right.
All right. Hearing no other questions, I want to thank everyone for coming and have a nice day. We're finished.